Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Engler alongside Jake Mastbaum and Sam Aleinikoff, and we're here from the Slope studio to talk some Cornell basketball. Obviously, another tough weekend for the Big Red, going into Dartmouth, dropping that game on Friday night, going into Harvard, playing a very tough Harvard team, not able to come out on top. But aside from the fact that these were two losses, there were things that were positive for the Big Red and things that they could work on. What do we see in these two games, and how are these things going to help the Big Red moving forward?
Speaking with Coach Courtney after the first game, the Dartmouth game, what he said he was really disappointed about was the effort in the first half. In the second half, he was pleased with it. They went on a big run, down 28 at one point in the second half, cut it all the way to 6 within the last 15 seconds or so of that ball game. So they went on a big run at the end. He was pleased with that effort down the stretch. That carried over into Harvard, where obviously they fell by 21, but it was really due to the superior talent of Harvard, just too much down low between Keith Wright and Kyle Casey. That being said, it was a great effort. It was something that Courtney really hadn't seen in the past couple games, and they had some sort of edge that they seemed to get back in that game. So taking that edge forward towards this weekend with two definitely winnable games, I think that's a positive that they can look for.
But if there's a silver lining to these games, it's Eric Peck. The kid was battling a flu bug all weekend, couldn't keep his food down, wasn't really 100%, only was able to lock 34 minutes, but was able to put up 35 points and was really productive when he was on the court. I think this is something that when we go forward to this weekend and the rest of the season, you could see Eric really blossom into the offensive player that everyone was expecting him to be at the beginning of the year and really become a force in the Ivy League.
Yeah, Coach Courtney after the game said it took maturity that Eric Peck didn't have at this time last year to play those two games. He said he was winded after one time up and down the court, but like you said, 34 minutes nonetheless.
So Eric Peck with the good play last weekend despite the illness. Fact remains, Big Red are 0-4 in the Ivy League. This is an important weekend. We're going to look ahead. Friday night at Yale, Saturday night at Brown. These are two games that Cornell can definitely win. At the same time, we said that last week about the Dartmouth game, and Cornell came out and did make a 2-point field goal in the first half. So obviously, we're going to need to see some more consistent play if we're going to start notching up some wins in the Ivy League. Looking first at the Yale game on Friday night, what is it going to take to beat this Yale team that is probably a middling team in the Ivy League, but a very quality basketball team? We saw them beat BC earlier in the year, Coach Donahue's team, and they're capable of coming out and playing very good basketball. So in order for the Big Red to go into New Haven and notch their first win on Friday night, what's going to happen?
Yeah, you're right. Yale, one of the bigger surprises in the Ivy League, especially in the non-conference schedule, most notably beating Boston College on the road, like you mentioned. But Yale struggling a little bit in league play, 2-2, beating lowly Brown twice, and then losing to the Peas on the road last weekend. But this is a good basketball team, and playing in John J. Lee Amphitheater over in Yale, it's as tough as it gets. And Sam, last week when we were doing this segment and you were previewing the Harvard game, you mentioned that you thought Keith Wright was one of the two best big men in the Ivy League. In my opinion, that other guy, Greg Mangano of Yale, he is an absolute beast. A slightly different player. I don't think he's as explosive as Keith Wright or as bouncy as a Kyle Casey, but he's averaging over 14 points a game, 4th in the Ivy League. He's averaging over 10 rebounds a game, 1st in the Ivy League. He's a guy who's more of a face-up big man. He can put the ball on the ground, step out and shoot the ball. His range is about 15 to 17, 18 feet away, but does shoot the three occasionally. On the defensive end does it as well, leading the Ivy League in blocks per game at 2.7 blocks per contest. Really a great player. Austin Morgan, a guy who talked about this Boston College game already, he was the one who really propelled Yale to victory with his three-point shooting. The Ivy League's been a little bit of a different story for Morgan. His three-point shooting percentage has gone down 24 percentage points, so he's got to figure it out already. They got Porter Braswell, who's kind of a steadying presence. He's a senior, providing that leadership at the point guard position. So Yale's a good team, and on the road, they're going to come out and play. Because at 2-2, this team really wants to pick up a win and maybe kind of propel themselves back into this Ivy race. So I think this is going to be a tough game for Cornell, especially with Mangano.
Jake, you're exactly right about Mangano, and I think the key is that Cornell is going to have to come up with a big performance from one of their big men, as we've been saying all year, to win this ballgame.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking ahead to Saturday night, Cornell goes into Providence to play Brown. Brown also 0-4 in the Ivy League, so this is a battle of the winless teams, both of which may have already gotten a win on Friday night, but are clearly going to be aching for a victory, to propel them going forward in the Ivy League. What is Cornell going to have to do to beat the Bears on Saturday?
Well, obviously last year they lost Matt Mullery, who was a senior. They lost him to graduation, one of the top players in the Ivy League last year. This year, though, they still are kind of a front court-based team. Up front, they start with Tucker Halpern, and he's a sophomore, one of the 2 sophomores in that starting lineup. And remember, this is a young team that Brown has. They only have 4 seniors on the roster, no juniors. And when you look at this Brown team, I liked Harvard's top 6 last week, and I talked a lot about their starting 5. Brown, from top to bottom, all 11 guys on their roster play. 9 of them log at least 13 minutes a game. So when you look at Brown, you have to really kind of look at the roster top to bottom. But like I said, it starts with Tucker Halpern up front, 6'8" guy. He gave Cornell some problems last year. Was able to give Jeff Foote some problems with his mobility, in fact. And Brown isn't exactly the type of team who's going to bang with you down low. Their heaviest guy, I believe, is 225. So Cornell's going to have the size to match up with them. The question is, can Cornell's bigs step out and defend them on the perimeter? Because Halpern is the top 3-point shooter on this team as well. That being said, he only shoots 36% from deep, and this isn't exactly a great 3-point shooting team, but Halpern kind of fits that mold. Their leading scorer is Peter Sullivan. He's a 6'5" forward kind of guard combo. Caused some problems for Cornell in the second game of the year last year. Put up 23 points, 5 rebounds. So he's a guy who can mix it up against Cornell as well. And the last piece that I think you really need to look at if you're Cornell is the new point guard they've got. He's a freshman, Sean McGonigal, 6'1". He's the only guy who started all 18 games for this Brown team, averages 32 minutes a game, does a little bit of everything, 4 rebounds, almost 5 assists, 9 points a game. So he's going to be a tough matchup for whoever Cornell has at the point, whether it's Matthews, whether it's Robleski, whether it's Asafo Ajay, kind of any of the host of point guards that Cornell can throw out there.
After the Harvard game last weekend, Coach Courtney said he liked his team's execution, but was looking for them to hit more shots in the next weekend. And if you remember the Brown game last year, Cornell put on one of their best shooting performances of the year. And I remember at the time, senior forward John Jakes attributed that to the nice Adidas balls that they were playing with at Brown. So maybe, you know what, they got those same basketballs over there in Providence. Maybe we could duplicate that shooting performance.
Well, I don't know whether they're going to have the Adidas balls all over the Ivy League on Saturday night, but another game worth looking at before we close this segment, maybe the biggest game that we've seen in the Ivy League so far this season, Princeton, Harvard, Saturday night, battle of the top 2 teams in the league, both undefeated. Any insight as to what we might expect to see on Saturday?
Well, I think this game is a lot bigger for Princeton than it is for Harvard right now. If you look at Princeton's schedule, they finish a majority of their games on the road. So I think it's really important for them to start 5-0, 6-0 in the league to kind of build in a cushion just in case they struggle on the road. With that said, seeing Harvard last week, I knew their front court was great. I was really impressed by how good their back court is as well. I think Harvard provides so many matchup problems for Princeton, even though they're a great defensive ball club. I'm going to pick Harvard in this one.
You know, Jake, I got to go with you on this one. I'm going to pick Harvard as well. This is a big game on ESPNU. One of the only games that's going to be nationally televised in the Ivy League all year, so it's a big time for the Ivy League to shine as a whole. So I think that's a big thing for Cornell as well, to get some publicity for this league. That being said, last year we saw a marquee game in the Ivy League between Harvard and Cornell at Cornell. Harvard obviously got blown out by 36. I don't think we're going to see as big of a blowout, but I got to think Harvard's got a big edge in this one. That front court was just so impressive to me last week. Keith Wright can do absolutely everything on the floor. Kyle Casey, now that he's almost back at 100%, when he's in that starting lineup, he's just unbelievable as well. The backcourt, as you mentioned, I just got to go with Harvard.
Yeah, well, either way, it's going to be a very interesting and potentially telling game as the way that the league might break down towards the end of the season based on the play here. Well, there you have it. A look at Cornell past weekend and this coming weekend. A look around the Ivy League a little bit. Looking forward, Friday night at Yale, Saturday night at Brown. Slope will be covering both those games. You can follow us on Twitter at SlopeTV Sports, and let's hope for a big win for the Big Red this weekend. Thanks for watching, guys.